this one going to be a bit different. Instead of covering the news like I normally do, figured I could try and do something a bit more investigative, where I only partially overcome my biases and did come up with a bit more of a plan to get the country back into shape. First of all, how I'd fix the housing crisis. Taxes were first. Change it since I figured the viewer retention would fall off a cliff. Basically, every politician says they want to fix the housing crisis. None really do. None really actually care that much. Maybe Albanese is like the closest to caring, how many houses he's like shut out. They still don't really want to fix it though. Now the reason for this is there is a massive housing bubble, not just Australia, the West at large, which does make fixing the housing crisis a bit of a double-edged sword. The policy's pretty simple in actuality. Actually implementing them would be hard and take some serious politics to not crash the entire economy, which why it hasn't really been done. First of all, I would implement a federal empty property tax equal to 25% of the property's estimated market value, which might sound odd in a bit of a housing crisis, but a lot of the problem is that instead of houses being sold, they're just hoarded because people know the value will go up, and this would help put a stop to that. There is already this with states, but I wouldn't put a federal one as well. Get rid of negative gearing, which it basically allows investors to just take a tax discount when they take a loss on real estate investment, which isn't the best for affordability and is kind of frankly stupid. I would also get rid of the 50% capital gains tax discount, which hasn't really done much except increase mass speculation. Next up, I'm not sure how actually feasible this is, but I would attempt to abolish or at least reform zoning laws. I'm not talking about farming or climate change protection ones. What I mean is residential and commercial zoning. These basically segregate houses in commercial areas, which makes it more complicated and expensive to build, and this is the reason we end up with lovely living areas like this. If we simply convert them, the mixed-use zoning areas, that will help Australians' physical, mental health, and the housing crisis. It would, and not just that, it would allow apartment buildings, other types of more compact housing, to be built more, which is significantly more efficient than this. Also, I would try and create some kind of public housing company built by the government to create more competition, which it would drive down prices, or at the very least I can't speak, subsidise, there we go, and incentivise building more than currently. I don't know how feasible that is, but I'd give it a good crack. Now, something you might, particularly astute viewer in the audience, may notice is but that would crash the market, make people's mortgages go underwater. Yeah, that's kind of the point. It's unfortunate. At this rate, keeping housing prices this high is just frankly unsustainable. They have to come down, no matter the cost. Now, it's not like I'm going to let your grandma starve or anything. I believe in programs to support people with underwater mortgages, extra welfare spending to help them, maybe even tax cuts for them. And extreme cases, maybe even a plan to buy underwater mortgages off people if they're particularly horrific. It would probably cause chaos for a while. At the same time, the housing crisis is unsustainable. It is strangling our economy. It is a crisis. I think it would sort itself out after all if it's managed well. To quote the big Paul himself, it's a recession we have to have. Next up, taxes. This is the boring bit. Skip it if you like. What? I'm not putting Subway surfers on this. First, now before you start thinking, this is some person who done no research and thinks taxing rich people will more magically fix the economy on its own. Green Party. My tax plan is not that, however, it does play a part in it. I will change the personal tax system from looking more like this to looking like this. with a modified bracket of 191 million to about 7 million. And the new bracket of tax of people paying 100,000 and 1,000 plus 62 cents for every dollar over 7 million. 7 million is a good amount where I feel like it's not small business owners or more small scale entrepreneurs and would allow for a fair bit more government spending, which very necessary for my plan, as you'll see later on, and without hurting growth and everyday Australians. Additionally, corporate tax would be increased to 39%, while for businesses under 25 million turnover annually, they would see a minor cut of 0.5% to their tax rate, changing it to 27% to, help support Australian small businesses. Also implement much more stringent anti-tax avoidance measures, including, if it's feasible and actually works, some kind of good faith clause somewhere in the tax law stating you must act in good faith and not attempt to purposely avoid taxes for any means. Like, you're not spending half the year in Melbourne and then whizzing off to the Maldives to claim you live there or something. Also, something like if it'd work, I'd introduce like prison sentences, for Australian nationals found guilty of avoiding taxes for a private company, maybe like a month for every 1 million Australian dollars avoiding paying tax. But I'm not sure what the specifics with that or if it'd even work. Now, I generally do believe tax cuts for the middle class and people lower are beneficial for the economy. It kind of makes sense that if people have more money, they will spend more and thus stimulate growth in jobs. I don't want to be over idealistic with my plan. If there is enough wiggle room, though, I would likely implement that. Now, finally here, the government. Pretty huge part of my plan is government spending. I love government spending. The Yanks love metaphors of, oh, we need someone to come in and run America like a business. Well, if you spend more on something in a business, I think tends to improve, and it's mostly true for countries as well. Infrastructure is something I want to spend big on. I love infrastructure. I would marry it if I could. It stimulates jobs, economic growth, investment, basically any good signals for an economy, really. Now, I am a pretty big advocate for trains. I don't think trains here to single-handedly save the Australian economy. I do think high-speed rail between like Geelong and Newcastle would be fucking sick. Yeah, more trains would be good for the economy and all of the other train glazing I will put on the screen. Also, I do believe how we should reform how roads and cars as a whole are treated in Australia. They're just so inefficient. We should be spending more on bus services, trains, trams. I don't know, whatever floats your boat, really. With just one bus, which is on the road equal to about like 2 cars, we can fit a whole 20 people. And even more so with trains. It's just so much more efficient, and it's practically like a matter of fiscal responsibility, I would argue. Next up, energy. I do support nuclear energy. It does have a very sort of concentrated opposition around here that's just able to block it. They're very good at doing that. I think renewables are like absolutely awesome though. Like, it's free power from the sun. This like And they don't pollute, they're cheaper than like fossil fuels, they're just awesome. I think we should be a lot more proactive in investing and supporting them instead of just shutting down old coal plants with no real plan. Also, I think that a royal commission is needed into the two, like, a big supermarkets. So we should probably let like the ACCC's, well, I don't know why there's 3C's, court case play out first. But if that doesn't work, it's really needed, because they're just so greedy, nobody can really stop them. Because in Australia, apart from the odd IGA or German fellow, Woolworths and Coles have a duopoly on Australian supermarkets, which isn't the healthiest for prices. Also, quick note, can we like ban them from using those electric price markers that jack up the prices? That should, like, be illegal. Anyway, Chapter 4, Conclusion. Look, I know they feel very bleak at the minute. Everything's just getting worse. People are getting more apathetic. Things are just getting crappier with no real light at the end of the tunnel. But please, don't give up hope. Something I don't think is talked about enough here is like how we are in a time of economic and societal crisis. And like all of the other crisis periods in history, it will end eventually. World War One gave way to the Roaring Twenties. The Great Depression gave way to the post-war era. The stagflation era gave way to the neoliberal era. And eventually this era, it will give way to something greater. Thank you for watching. I hope you're having a great day. I spent about, like, probably 2 days making this video. Like, I know that, and not just, like, 2 days of sitting around. I actually spent 2 days, basically, like, the entire day making the script. And some other days I did bits, because I was busy. I've still been busy. Like, I wrote part of this video in the middle of the car. Anyway, yeah, thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed. Really put a lot of effort into this. And I will see you in the next one.